All right, everybody, welcome back. Stupid versus Spread. We are in NFL Week 4 talk, so we're going to recap all of Week Three's happenings, give a Week 4 preview, and then talk picks for this upcoming Week 4. Coming out the gate, I think it was a pretty good week. We had some upsets from some teams that I don't think we expected to win, or at least weren't favored to. Specifically, the Dolphins, who were I think like 6 or 7 point dogs at the close, and then not an underdog, but certainly have been performing well. The Eagles both remain undefeated so far. Eagles coming off a very dominant win over the Commanders, who are just we'll talk about it later, but they're not very good. Um, and then Kansas City and the Bills both lost, both had tough losses. Um, not something you're necessarily concerned about, but I think overall it was a pretty good week, pretty fun week that we were watching. I of the Eagles and Dolphins, do you think either of them? Not that they don't deserve to be undefeated, but like it's very early in the season to hype that aspect up. Would you agree?
Um, yeah, yeah, in some sense, because I think, I guess the Dolphins feels a little bit more legitimate because they beat the Bills at home, despite the fact that I think everybody in the Bills cramped at the same time.
Correct.
Um, but you can make the argument that Tua didn't know what his name was, so it kind of evens out.
Yeah, but I mean,
You
so
know, the NFL is just going to try to sidestep any questions on whether or not he was concussed in that moment because he definitely was.
uh,
Allegedly, definitely.
yeah, allegedly, definitely. The Dolphins, Tua went 13 for 18, 186 yards, 1 touchdown. Not bad. They also ran 2 touchdowns in on the ground. The Bills, uh, and this is where I get concerned about the Bills when we start talking about their proficiency as a team. Josh Allen went 42 for 63, 400 yards, 2 touchdowns, and they had less than 100 yards on the ground, or just above 100 yards. Uh, and time and again, we have seen, and I'm not taking anything away from the Dolphins. That was a fun game to watch. Great comeback, especially after that punt. You think, oh, maybe momentum is
Yeah.
shifted, where you have a safety from a terrible punt into your own guy, which was very funny in and of itself. But you look at where the Bills have struggled, and typically the Bills have struggled, with the exception of their loss to Kansas City in that awesome shootout of a game in the playoffs, is that it's poor weather, it's difficult to throw, so your go-to game should be that you run the ball and play good defense. And the Bills in like 3 consecutive years have not been able to get a run game going. So I think it's a point of concern for them. I think it's really their only weakness. But they certainly didn't look their best against the Dolphins. I know that sounds weird with Josh Allen having 400 yards and 2 touchdowns, but you know, if you don't win a game and your quarterback is throwing 42 completions and is the highest rusher on your team, it almost becomes Josh Allen doing too much. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I tend to take it as more of a blip on the radar given how many injuries they had on the defensive side of the ball. I think the more alarming stat is that in the past 2 years they've played 6 1-score games and lost all of them.
Yeah.
That's the more concerning part to me is that they haven't found ways to win close games. As far as early season trip on the road to South Beach in a game where Miami has a lot of juice early in the year,
Mm-hmm.
I tend to treat that less as a point of concern for the Bills. I think the way that they played the first 2 weeks and with the amount of turmoil they had this week and a short week on Monday night, um, going to Miami after a Monday night win against Tennessee. Um, I think that's less of a concern, but the bigger concern for me is the fact that they just haven't found ways to win close games. And that's probably the only concern you have with the Bills going forward because we see this throughout the year, right? Unless an injury happens to Josh Allen, things are going to fluctuate, or Stephon Diggs. But I think even Diggs, they might be able to get around as long as it's not a season-ending injury.
Yep.
But if they can ride this storm, they're still going to be a Super Bowl contender come playoff time. So it's more about how do they find ways to win these games where they're being challenged. And they they don't get any chance to sleep because they get the Ravens at the Ravens this week. So a difficult part of the schedule for them. I think ultimately this may end up helping the Bills in the long run because it kind of takes some of the Super Bowl focus off of their season, at least in the short term. Because I think throughout the first 3 weeks of the season leading up to this game, everybody's been talking about how the Bills are basically playing to win the Super Bowl every week,
Right.
which is unsustainable from a talking point perspective, and it's unsustainable for a team to have to carry the weight of are they going to win the Super Bowl in every single game.
Right.
Very few teams have been able to do that throughout history in the NFL. So um, I think we'll look back on this game. I think similar to the New England loss in Buffalo last year, where it's just a conglomeration of factors that really led to a Bills loss. I think as long as they're in position to round into shape the final month of the year and carry momentum into the playoffs, I think they'll be fine. I think as long as the Dolphins can avoid some key injuries, though, they are a really good team. But I think for the Dolphins and the Eagles, and based on the way that they both played, I would say I trust the Eagles more. It still does come down to, oddly enough, between Tua and Jalen Hurts, all going all the way back to Alabama. Like, do you
Yeah.
trust? How do you trust both or one of them to be able to win in big games? And Tua certainly wasn't overwhelmingly spectacular in that game against a very
No, not at
banged
all.
up, yeah, against a very banged up Bills defense. Tua hasn't shown any chinks, or sorry, Jalen Hurts hasn't shown any chinks in the armor this year. But they also haven't played a top high end defense in the NFC, and it's going to take a while for that to happen. So I think that's the interesting angle for the Dolphins and the Eagles is what do when are they able to develop the confidence in their quarterbacks that they will need in the playoffs? Because I think what it's going to come down to come playoff time will be do you take a team that's otherwise well rounded and trust that your quarterback can make a play or two, or is it about the guy who we know is the guy when things are not going exactly his way finds a way to win? And I think we've seen over the past few years that you'd rather have the quarterback than the rest of the team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And so next matchup between Dolphins Bills is late December. I think it's the second to last week of the season on the 18th of December. So should be a good matchup there. We'll circle it because obviously with these two being in the same division right now, Dolphins are up one, and presumably both teams are good enough to beat the Jets and the Patriots twice, with the exclusion of Mac Jones, especially in the next 6 to 8 weeks. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Um, so really, it almost feels like, depending on how the season goes, unless the Dolphins really shit the bed, that could be a very, very big game. So that's exciting. The other flip side of this, so the other powerhouse team in the AFC that everybody talks about also lost. Kansas City Chiefs drop a stinker to the Indianapolis Colts. They lost 17-20. If you had watched the Colts in the past 2 weeks, they were not good. But they go to Indianapolis. Matt Ryan throws 27 completions, 220 yards, two touchdowns, and they were able to get some ground game going with Jonathan Taylor. I don't know. It's certainly not a panic button. The Chiefs kind of lay this egg once every year, about week 4 to like 7. So they kind of got this out of the way. I feel like this year, where like they'll go into a team where they are just absolutely dominantly favorited, and then they play the game and they just do not look like the Chiefs. So, like, the powerful offense isn't there. I think they scored 2 touchdowns, but one was over a missed field goal. So like they really didn't put on a strong performance. They didn't score at all in the fourth quarter. So there were some. I don't think it's that concerning for the Chiefs. It's impossible to look at a schedule and be like, we should be 17-0. But this is probably one they want back, I think, later on in the year. But who knows?
Yeah, I think with how competitive the AFC is, I think that's probably magnified. But
Yes.
this was a very frustrating game as somebody who backed the Chiefs in this game because it was one where you could tell where this was headed almost immediately. I think when they muffed the punt at the beginning of the game, you sort of got it's like there's that gut feeling in college football games when you're behind a favorite and something goes haywire immediately. Like I think the Nebraska Oklahoma game was a perfect example of this, but it worked out. Where we give out Oklahoma minus 13 and a half. Like they're the way better team. This shouldn't matter. And then Oklahoma goes 3-and-out. Nebraska walks down the field and scores. And you're just like, it's one of those where you're like, is this really going to happen? Like just overwhelmingly in the face of everything I said, despite the fact that there's no logical reason for it to happen, but it's going to happen exactly opposite of what you thought. And then
Right.
obviously that game worked out because Oklahoma scored 45 unanswered points. But Kansas City this week was a situation where as soon as Sky Moore muffs that punt, you're like, is this really going to be one of these games where Kansas City's undoubtedly the better team, and they find a way to lose? And that's exactly what happened. Like they dropped. Kelsey had, I think, two key drops. They got a field goal block.
Mhm.
They missed another one. Like they shot themselves in the foot over and over and over again. And yeah, they'll figure it out. But it's frustrating when you know the Chiefs. I would still say to anybody who didn't watch that game, the Chiefs were absolutely the better team in that game. They just continued to shoot themselves in the foot at critical junctures, and the Colts didn't make any mistakes, despite the fact that Matt Ryan got body slammed into oblivion on a strip sack. He somehow managed to stay in the game, and uh,
Celebrated so much.
yeah, if you haven't seen that highlight, he got hit, picked up, and thrown through the earth's crust on one play. I don't know how he got up and walked away immediately, but it was a absolutely beautiful demolition of Matt Ryan. But my point is, this is a game. Kansas City will take the film, do whatever they bury the football. They'll let Andy Reid eat it with some hot sauce. Whatever they're gonna do, they'll move on to next week and they'll be fine.
Yeah, and a big game next week. Chiefs at Bucks on Sunday Night Football. So definitely, not that there's look aheads in the National Football League as opposed to college, but it kind of felt like maybe that could have been it. Like the offense wasn't clicking. They didn't seem prepared and set.
Yeah,
Um, Cowboys on Monday Night Football over a win against the Giants. I didn't have too many notes. I think the Giants team looks good. I think if you're looking at the NFC East, right, we're going to talk about the Eagles here in a second and a little more. But obviously the Eagles look very good through 3 weeks. Arguably, they've only played 1.5 good teams. But I think the East can be competitive between the Giants or the Cowboys and the Eagles because if you look at how Micah Parsons has been playing and you look at how Dallas's defense has been playing, uh, they're doing spectacularly, to be honest with you. Um, and I think the Giants kind of came back down to earth. You know, there was a lot of we're undefeated memes, and they were 2-0. So it's like, all right, well, I get it. You're not, you didn't expect this, but 2-0 is not inherently something to write home about. Although it's hard to win in the National Football League at all times. Um, but I was impressed with how the Cowboys played, especially with like an offense that you think is going to be a little anemic. Cooper Rush went 21 for 31, 1 touchdown, 200 yards, and then they got another 178 yards on the ground. Like that's pretty impressive for a team that you didn't think was going to come out firing, I guess.
yeah. I mean the I think the difference here, yeah, the Cowboys defense is playing out of their minds, and they're really holding. Jerry Jones does his weekly radio spot where he continues to drum up some sort of Cooper Rush, Dak Prescott quarterback controversy that doesn't exist, but their defense is really what's keeping them in these games.
Yeah.
I think the difference between these two teams is very simple. The Cowboys are a incomplete team that can be very good. The Giants are a very bad team that's very well coached, and that's what's keeping them in these games right now. And that says more about Joe Shane and Brian Dable than I think anything. And this is the point that I'm going to keep hammering home on this podcast that nobody who's a New York Giants fan really wants to hear me say is that this team is still not good. They're still not a good team. They have they have made some they've made some improvements to their offensive line. Saquon looks healthy. I will give them that credit. Daniel Jones is not a good quarterback. Their defense still has a ton of holes, but what they are is incredibly well coached by Brian Daboll, who is proving that he's the guy that they've been looking for, and they execute and they don't make a lot of mistakes, in which is crazy for a team that's being piloted by Daniel Jones. So when you add all that up, this game was close. It was a good win for the Cowboys, but the Giants competing to me in any meaningful way is still a long way off. Just because it's going to be so hard to sustain for them over the course of the year when the talent is just not there. And that's not me hating on the Giants because of some New York rival. There's not really a rivalry between the
No,
Giants and the Jets.
no,
So
nothing.
so it's not that. It's just I don't want Giants fans to think that because they're 2-1, because they pulled out a win against um, a bad Tennessee team and a well, maybe not a bad Tennessee team, but a Tennessee team that gave that game away, and a very bad Carolina team, that all of a sudden means that the rebuild's over and they're contending. That's not the case. They have a long way to go. I I am more hopeful for the Giants than probably the Jets, because they still have a crack to get a quarterback, whereas the Jets under this current regime might not. So if Zach Wilson's not the guy, which we've talked about that before. But anyway, the point is, yeah, the biggest difference between these two teams, and I think to your point, I think the Cowboys can definitely be competitive if they can tread water long enough to get Dak back and get some of their receivers healthy and get this offense back to what we expected it to be. They all of a sudden turn into a very interesting team in the NFC East.
Yeah. So through 3 games, the Dallas Cowboys have 13 sacks. That's pretty damn good. So the
Yeah,
defense certainly keeping them in this game, and the Cowboys don't have the hardest schedule of all time. I think Dak is looking to come back, and I don't know like exactly what they're thinking, but I'm thinking the first game they think he's going to return is either against the Rams or the Eagles. So I think in 3 weeks you'll probably see real discussions about whether they bring Dak back to play the Eagles at the Eagles on October 16th on Sunday Night Football. I think if you are strategizing about when to bring him back, that might be the best time. He got his stitches out this past Monday, and they're looking at him starting against the Eagles. So if the Cowboys can win against the Commanders this coming week, which is entirely possible because the Commanders were very bad last week, although Carson Wentz obviously first 2 weeks had great numbers, although that didn't translate to wins. So if the Commanders, shit the bed again, Cowboys come out on top, then the Cowboys go to the Rams. You probably understand that that's not. Unless Cooper Rush is doing something amazing, that's probably not a game you come out winning. But then your Sunday Night Football at the Eagles, 1 to 1.5 games behind in the standings, and I think that's early enough in the season where you're certainly looking at making a run from there. So I think that'll be interesting. Some other quarterbacks have been hurt as well. So of note, so Mac Jones out 6 to 8 weeks with a severe high ankle sprain. Everyone saw the photo of him, very sad. Obviously in a lot of pain. That shit hurts. And then Justin Herbert and Jameis Winston have been playing, um, or, injured for the past week or so. I was very surprised that Justin Herbert started. He didn't have a bad performance per se, but Winston did, and he has like 4 vertebrae that are, I don't know, turned to powder. It sounds like every time they mention it. And Herbert, obviously, with his broken cartilage in his ribs, I get that they're probably hyped up on painkillers and it's not affecting them, but I was very surprised that Justin Herbert started this game. It almost feels irresponsible in a game, especially a game that you lose anyway, to throw him out there. Because if you look back, like quarterbacks with injuries, and this is what they're saying is like, oh, Justin Herbert wants to be out on the field. It's like, well, that's great, but he has a coach, and his coach needs to play for the season, not play for the game. And we saw this last year with Russell Wilson when he had that thumb injury, where he was out for like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and he was supposed to be out 6 to 8 weeks, and he came back, and yeah, he played 3 games, and they were stinkers. They were bad. They were like awful, awful games for Russell Wilson. And then the exact same time frame in which he was supposed to actually have come back, he comes and returns to his former self and throws a little better, and the Seahawks at that time win the game. I just don't understand the value of this early in the season, especially if you're the Chargers and you're like really thinking you could make a deep run at the playoffs. If Justin Herbert like breaks his cartilage in week 2 of play, there cannot be any reason why you are starting him in week 3. I don't know if you disagree.
I mean, we'll never know what the he actually felt like, and I didn't get a chance to watch this game as closely as I wanted to. Um,
He didn't look bad, but he looked slower, and obviously they didn't play with the same electricity that they had. No pun intended, Jesus. But they're playing a Jags team who looks good. Granted, they look good, but I just don't see. I know you don't admit that you're going to essentially concede a game in the NFL in a 17-week season, but if your star quarterback is like cartilage broken, I don't. I shooting him up with painkiller and then throwing him out on the field seems a little irresponsible to me.
yeah, I don't disagree if that's the way it unfolded behind the scenes. I don't mean in the game, obviously. I mean I've seen some of the highlights, um, but I think more importantly, I think how do you send them back out with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, down 38-10? Like
Yeah,
what?
oh, he wants to be out there with his guys. Fuck
Yeah,
that. Who
yeah. No,
cares?
that's the part that doesn't make any sense. You know he's banged up, and I think so. I think if circumstances were different, and the rest of the Chargers were healthy, the Chargers are quickly superseding or assuming the role of the Ravens last year, where they're
Yeah,
the team that everybody loved, and they now have more injuries than they can count at very critical positions. Rashawn Slater's out for the year. That's a horrible loss for them. Bosa's banged up. J.C. Jackson hasn't played. It's only a matter of time before Derwin James is out for the season. They have severe injury. Like Keenan Allen's out. Mike Williams missed a game. I think Josh Palmer's now out for the year.
hmm
They have so many injuries that I think that if they were healthy otherwise, there's a chance Justin Herbert doesn't play that game. But I think they probably saw this as it's the Jaguars. We can win this game even with Justin Herbert playing on one foot. Send him out
yeah.
there and we'll go win this game. And that I think I think it speaks more to the Jaguars than it does to necessarily the Chargers. Any sort of deficiencies they have. I think the Jaguars actually have the potential to win that division.
I
Um,
think I have vastly underestimated how much progress that team has made in the past year under proficient coach as opposed
yeah,
to
exactly. A guy who's
mine.
not obsessed with co-eds in Ohio.
Yeah,
Um,
nothing wrong with that. However, I
so
think I
yeah,
think a lot of people
I mean,
underestimated.
if that's what's floating your relationship boat, then go for it, man. Just you're probably not qualified to be an NFL head coach. Um, but so yeah, and also have fun Nebraska with that. But uh, the I so I think that yeah, he probably shouldn't have played that game. They probably should have punted in a game they were probably going to lose anyway. Um, and I think yeah, the easier view is right now they have to pull the Cowboys playbook and find a way. And this is where Brendan Staley needs to make some money because they're very banged up. Their offense is not going to be as high flying as it normally is. They have to win games defensively and keep the ship floating in the right direction for the next few weeks in a very competitive division until they
Mhm.
can get some guys back. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Chargers. I still believe in them. I think they're just very very injured. The Slater loss is the one thing that I think they may not be able to overcome because he's a second year player and he's already one of the best left tackles in football
Yeah, I mean,
statistically. So it's a huge loss for them, and we'll see what happens and how they're able to adjust that line. Corey Linsley's out too and has been out there. He's a Pro Bowl center. So like I said, they're just banged up everywhere. I think that probably factored into the decision to let Herbert play.
which seems silly because if you're like, hey, our most proficient and experienced offensive linemen are out, should we start our hurt quarterback? And
Yeah,
your answer is like,
yeah, it
yeah,
is.
let's do it. Let's do it. And you're like,
Yeah, it is backwards, but I think they thought, all right, Justin, we know you can't feel anything in your midsection. We're going to go ahead and need you to win this game for us, which
yeah.
is very backwards and doesn't make any sense. But
I just obviously not privy to what the organization was doing. I questioned the decision anyway. And Jameis, obviously, I don't think Jameis should be out there. I mentioned him as well. You know, he's playing with, I think, a literal broken back. Is that true?
I don't really know because
We need a
he
doctor on this show.
he has said four fractured vertebrae, or that's what the team has said. But
Yeah, but he did his post interview on week 1, and he said everything hurts. And you're
yeah,
like,
pain,
oh, like you're
a
going
lot of
through it.
pain.
Huh.
But but like you wouldn't be playing through that. So I don't know what the diagnosis actually is, and regardless, he's not playing well. I think take Jameis is a totally different situation than Justin Herbert because Justin Herbert is still finding a way to play at a proficient level, despite the fact that everybody knows that he's hurt. I can't even tell if Jameis is hurt because he's playing so terribly. So and that offense is playing so terribly. So I think it's I think your reasoning on Herbert is very much correct. They shouldn't have played him in a game where they were playing a very competitive team and had a real chance to lose that game, and they probably need him healthy more than they need that win. But I think for Jameis, I think the bigger problem for the Saints is their offense has just gone nowhere the first 3 weeks. And like, granted, they've got the receiver core is improved, but the offensive line has had some issues. Their running backs are shells of themselves. Mark Ingram's not helping them at all. Alvin Kamara looks like he's so distracted from his off the field stuff that he's not even invested in any of these games. So it is they are just completely dysfunctional on offense. Um, and their defense is keeping them in games, but the Saints have some real problems on offense, and I think they could stand to go to somebody like Taysom Hill, get creative in the running game, and really just play physical Big Ten football and try to win some games that way and generate some momentum because whatever they're doing right now is not working.
Yeah, let's go. Let's see NFL triple option. I'm just kidding. That won't work. That won't work, but it'd be fun to see.
I mean, the Bears are like a snow game away from
Oh,
trying. Yeah.
we are getting to that right now. So we're gonna go through. There weren't as many storylines this week, so we're gonna go through our top 5 teams across the NFL that we think are the top 5 teams. We're also gonna go through our bottom 5 teams. So the way this works is we pick them and that's it. So okay, I'm gonna give my top 5. Then you give your top 5. I won't. This one. This is easy until you get to about 4 for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Um,
the fifth team you could just there's like 5 other teams that you could put in here.
okay, so I'm gonna here's my top 5. Number 1, Bills.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the Bills are doing what they did, and I think it's impressive. I think Josh Allen is a beast. Granted, it didn't come out with a win, and we talked about establishing the running game. If they can do that, I think they're still the best team in the NFL. Number 2, the Eagles. Eagles have been very dominant, which is awesome for Eagles fans, not awesome for me because I'm a known hater. But this is the typical MO of a team in the NFC East that goes into the playoffs and loses in the wild card weekend. Like, dominant team who doesn't play strong opponents, gets a lot of hype, then like Cowboys almost every year, then goes into the playoffs and they get smushed by a team that they should have beaten. It happens to the Cowboys all the time. It happens to Eagles. Every time the NFC East team wins the Super Bowl, Giants, Eagles, they're always underdogs. They're always like wild card guys that like sneak in and we're the dogs. You saw the dog masks from that Eagles run. So
Mm-hmm.
I this is the hater coming up. They're a good team. I would like to see them play someone that isn't Carson Wentz getting sacked 5 times in 8 snaps. And then maybe we can agree that they're like a super good team. So that's why they're not number 1, even though they're undefeated. Kansas City, number 3. I think that's pretty straightforward. Again, I think they had one of those typical like early in the season losses. Bills in Kansas City, they will click by the time the playoffs come around, and we might get some awesome games from that. Number 4, I'm going to go Dolphins. Tua, I think, is playing really, really well. I think the coaching is there, and I think they're a strong team. And then 5, I went with Green Bay over the Bucks. Part of that is recency bias because of
They won.
yeah, they won. But I put an asterisk next to the Bucks. So if the Bucks get their wide receiver core back, their star wide receivers back, and there's a couple of them that are out right now, I think they'll take Green Bay's spot because I don't think Green Bay right now is capable of a deep run without that defense. Um, and I question, like, at some point we're gonna get the Giselle comment of like, what's Aaron Rodgers supposed to do? Like throw to himself? Like that's how weak they are in the receiving core. Um, but but if the Bucks don't get anyone back before about middle of the season and they have time to get clicking and really taking that next step, then Green Bay, I think, stays number 5 for me. But those are my top 5/6 teams in the NFL. Michael, let me hear them.
I have the same top two for you. I'm not really that worried about the Bills' loss. And the Eagles, I think, have looked they've been the most across the 3 weeks. They've been the consistently most dominant team. Like we said, I still want to see them do it against a better defense. The win against Minnesota, I think we're underrating, is fairly impressive. I think more so from the defensive side of the ball and the way that they dominated Minnesota's offense, which they also didn't look good yesterday until the last quarter against the Lions. But
So I would like to interject here though, because so this week should be an interesting matchup. It's Jaguars at Eagles. But aside from the Cowboys, the Eagles don't play a good team until November 27th when they play the Packers. The Packers come to Philly. That's the first good defense they'll face aside from the Cowboys. Like that's a problem. For if I'm an Eagles fan, that's like a worrisome problem because it does mean you might not see the most elite defenses in the league before you get to the playoffs.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it more so for me, it's very tough to sustain this kind of momentum across that long a period of time. So I think that's probably the biggest concern with Philly right now. All the pieces are there, the talent's there, they're deep at every position, they're playing really well, but how it's easier for teams to either start slow and build mid to late in the season and carry that momentum into the playoffs, or start quickly, hit the lull, make the adjustments, make some roster moves, and then pick it back up at the end of the season. Um,
Mm-hmm.
just because I think it's so you can't be 100% 100% of the time. I'm a firm
Mm-hmm.
believer of that. So it I think it'll be interesting to see how the Eagles' momentum fluctuates throughout this season. But I think talent-wise, they're one of the 5 best teams in the NFL easily. Um, I have the Dolphins 3 over the Chiefs. I think they're just a more complete team right now, and I don't think it's just because you take Tyreek Hill off of one and put him on the other, and that jumps having Mahomes, because Mahomes is better than Tua. I don't think anybody would ever argue that, but I think the combination of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and the way that Mike McDaniel is calling the offense is really proving to be an incredible combination,
Yeah.
and one that almost, I don't want to say any quarterback could succeed in, because I don't want Tuanon coming after me, um, but I think it's underrated how much stability that gives that offense in the floor has gone so much higher, because
Yeah.
if Tua has a bad game, they still are able to score points. Whereas
Yeah, you
last
do
year
an end
that
around
wasn't
to
the
Tyreek
case.
Hill on a reverse, and he gets 30 yards.
Yeah,
Like it's
exactly. Like whereas there was when Miami went to New Orleans last year was a prime example of, like, if Tua is having a crazy Tua game, they just can't move the ball. And this year that those games won't happen, because Mike McDaniel will find a way to get the zone running scheme going, or to get the ball in short yardage spaces to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Like, they're never dead offensively. So
right.
I think that's what makes them dangerous this year. Whereas I think the Chiefs have, if they aren't having that game, it's a little bit harder for them to adjust. So I think that's why I have the Dolphins over the Chiefs, and then I have the Packers as well, 5th. I'll go back to what I said last week. I think the the difference between the Packers and the Bucks right now, and I don't particularly care if when Brady gets his receivers back. I think something's off with the Brady Byron Leftwich offense as it's currently schemed. And I'm not saying they can't find it, but I think there's bigger schematic relationship dynamic, structural problems, and just the way they carry themselves, their body language, the way that offense is ticking right now, they just don't look like they're in sync. Whereas I think for the Packers, it's just finding a couple guys, just one or two that Rodgers can trust to be in the spot that he expects them to be when he gets rid of the football. And if the Packers can find that over the course of the next 14 weeks, they'll walk into the playoffs ready to go on a run. So that's why I have the Packers ahead.
I don't hate that. As far as bottom five, um, so I have an interesting list here. I don't know how interesting people will find it. Number one, worst team, 32 out of 32. The Chicago Bears are.
I'm a fan of this.
Okay. So, okay, this is not a hater move. I like the Chicago Bears. I This is the worst. Like, this is the worst team I have seen in a very long time. They have 2 wins that they shouldn't have. I don't know how they beat the 49ers. I mean, they were lucky the weather came into play there. And the Bears don't have an offense. Like, it doesn't exist. They run the only thing they do is run the ball. And as soon as you start scheming that way, like, it's wild to me. They have something like 23 pass attempts in 3 games in 2022 in the NFL. That's absurd. That's ridiculous. Like, you can't be a good
Sure is,
offense.
man.
You can't win games doing that. And I I don't know what they're doing. Like, it's I watched the Bears Texans because I had the under and the over hit, and that was very shocking to me. What was more shocking to me was that, like, what are they doing on offense? Justin Fields can throw the ball a little bit, right? Like,
I still think he's got talent that I think he's just in a terrible situation. I think they have no offensive line there, and they have absolutely no skill talent to speak of.
Yeah, and what's miraculous too is that, like, you know, how do you throw the ball that many times and think, oh, this is a winning strategy? Justin Fields threw 17 passes, completed 8 of them, threw 2 interceptions on 100 yards. I guess what they're saying is, oh, we turn the ball over all the time, so we can't throw it. It's like, yeah, but you can't. Like, the Texans are not a good team, and I'll get to that in a second. But they ran for 200 yards. They had like 250, 300 yards total offense. I don't understand what the Bears are doing. The offense confuses the shit out of me. Khalil Herbert is a great running back, so it's a good scheme, but you got to get Justin Fields involved in the way they're playing. That's absurd. 23, it's not 23 passes, it's 23 completed passes. So I stand corrected there. But that's atrocious. Like, Justin Fields can't be that bad. And if he is, you got to go to the next man up. Like, you can't win in the NFL not throwing the football. It's absurd to me. I don't get it. Next on the list, this is like a rant list. Texans, they're number 2, so 31 to 32. I understand Bears at 32 is harsh. Look, the Texans are bad. We've known this since the beginning of time for this year. Still pulled off the greatest trade of all time. I'm looking at the schedule. They are currently 0 and 2 and 1, so they have a non-loss. That's great. I don't see more than 3 wins for the Texans this year, and that would shock me. Like, I'm looking at their schedule. They have Chargers, then Jags, Raiders, Titans, Eagles, Giants, possible. Commanders, possible. Dolphins, Browns, possible. Cowboys, Chiefs, Titans, Jags again, who are good, and then Colts. I don't see more than 4 wins there. So they may be, a 4-win team heading into the picks. Number 3, Commanders. The Washington Commanders should be a good team, and they are not. And it's baffling. And I don't really understand why. Like, Carson Wentz, for all of his flaws and his performance on Sunday, he got sacked 8 times? Yeah, 8 times, which is hard to do. 9 times. He got sacked 9 times. It was his record. The skill positions that the Commanders have should lead them to have a good offense. And we saw that because, Wentz was the passing leader through two games this year until week 3 when he didn't do anything. But defense has all the talent in the world and they can't stop anybody. And it's mind-boggling. I blame the coordinator Jack Del Rio. I
Yeah,
think he needs.
Jack Del Rio is your Gene Chizik.
Yeah, he needs to be fired. Like
Yeah, no,
we
he's your
he
he's
had.
your
I would say the Commanders have a top 12, 10 to 12 defense in the league if schemed correctly and done correctly, and they let up so many points. It's absurd, and they never make any corrections. I mean, the Commanders. This is in 3 games. The Commanders gave up 22 to the Jaguars, 24 to the Eagles, and 36 to the Lions. Can't win like that. Cannot. You just can't. And it's very frustrating, including two halves where they absolutely just didn't do anything. Fourth team on this list, and fifth team. I really don't have a distinguishing mark here. Seahawks and the Jets. I think both lack skill position players. I think both lack quarterbacks that are long term. Upsetting teams, not fun to watch. So this was my bottom 5, and more of it is a bottom 5 of teams who should be performing well and aren't. Because I do think Gino is a decent quarterback and might be able to pull some stuff off. I just don't see why they're not going at it. Anyway, that's my rant. Michael, what's your bottom 5?
So my worst team, is the Seahawks. They stink. They are clearly setting themselves up for the ability to draft one of the quarterbacks coming out this next year.
Is it Gino's fault? Is it all Gino's fault? I don't think it is.
I don't think it is. I just don't think they're a very good team. I think they've got 2 good wide receivers and
Yep.
a ish offensive line. The defense is very young, and they've been depleted of draft picks, so they're just not good. They have 3 running backs, none of which they've committed to as being the guy. I don't think Rashad Penny's particularly good. Travis Homer led them in touches last week, which doesn't make any sense because if Kenneth Walker was healthy and Rashad Penny, I get that they trailed the entire game to San Francisco, but put the ball in the hands of your best players.
A radical thought for some.
Yeah, and they just it doesn't matter who they play at quarterback because they're just not very talented. I think that there's a chance I am going with this based off of who I think will end up with the worst records, and I think the Seahawks have a chance to end up with the worst record. Then I have the Texans. The Texans are spunky, but they are just really bad.
I mean, completely depleted on every single.
Yeah, they just don't have a lot of talent. Then I have the Bears. Everything you said is correct. I have held on to the take that Justin Fields could be a guy. That take disappears every day because he should be at this point, right? If he's anything, you just run him on bootlegs every single play
Yeah.
to the opposite hash and then start throwing the football at some point, right? If the offensive line's that bad and the receivers can't get open, you just have to start running him out on bootlegs every play and give him the option to either run it or throw it. And they just
Right.
and maybe that's an oversimplification of NFL offense, but you have to move the pocket and give him a chance to actually throw. But to me, that shows that they just don't really believe in him as a thrower consistently, which means he's probably not anything. Then I have the Jets. I have the Jets probably ahead of where most people have them, just because we haven't. I think the rookies and the second-year players have, by and large, pretty much panned out, which is a good sign for Joe Douglas. Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to be given the chance to see it through because their free agent acquisitions have not been good. C.J. Mosley missed a year and has missed some big plays, but he's not the worst one. DJ Reed got smoked this entire game by uh, T Higgins, whereas
Yeah.
they put Ahmad Gardner on Jamar Chase, and he looked very competent, so which is very promising for your first round rookie. But I think besides one, the play Higgins caught where he got his brain scrambled on the personal foul by Lamarcus Joyner, who also was terrible, and they brought him back for this year, so that's also on Douglas. But besides that play, which was very well defended, T. Higgins just made an incredible catch. He also made a catch at the beginning of that game over DJ Reed that should have been a touchdown. He was incredible. T. Higgins was. But besides that play, Ahmad Gardner's been Sauce has been lights out for the Jets, and their rookies, their pass rushing rookies, even Michael Clemens, who ended up in the 5th round, have been good. So their draft picks have been good, but the rest of the team sucks. So we'll see what Zach Wilson comes back to. I think part of this is Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco was abysmal against the Bengals. Abysmal.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't for lack of protection. It wasn't for his receivers getting open. It was Joe Flacco just being absolutely awful in this game. So there's a chance that the Jets climb the power rankings if Zach Wilson comes back and shows some of the potential he demonstrated at times last year. If they can get the offense rolling, it's tough because yes, the pass coverage mix-ups have happened. They have been disorganized. They haven't played well on defense. But they also put themselves, because Joe Flacco can't do anything, they put themselves in the same situations over and over and over again.
I will say, if
can't hold up that long.
If you make your 37-year-old quarterback pass 52 times, maybe it's your scheme that's incorrect.
Yeah. Yeah, I think defensively more than offensively, because if you put yourself in a negative game script that bad that he has to do that, you're probably a bigger problem.
Mm-hmm.
But that's enough of the Jets. And then finally, climbing up the ladder, I guess that would be 32, 31, 30, 20, tied for 28th. I have the Panthers and Commanders, and then I'm going to also put the Saints offense in a 3-way tie. Because the Saints offense is that bad. We saw it against the Panthers, who the Panthers just beat them because the Saints offense couldn't do anything. It couldn't do anything, despite the fact that the Panthers only scored 21 points. Baker Mayfield has the lowest QBR among qualifying quarterbacks in the NFL this year. Carson Wentz, we already talked about, and the Commanders at length. But the Panthers, Matt Rule's going to get fired. The Saints offense is maybe the worst unit in football so far this year, which might be saying a lot, but they're that bad. And I think the Panthers are starting a very good football team. So I think with that, we can move into picks.
All right, so let's preview the week. We'll do picks like we always do. So we'll do the Thursday Night Football game, then we'll go down the slate for 1 p.m. Ooh, actually, we do have a little tea and crumpets game too, and then we'll go into the 4 p.m. and then primetime game. So Thursday Night Football, Dolphins at Bengals. My only real note about this, because I originally had the under, and I'm considering changing that, is that Tyreek Hill says he, quote, has something for Eli Apple. They are like feuding on Twitter or something.
That goes back to the AFC Championship game last year.
Yes. So if I'm making a pick here, I might do something crazy like Tyreek Hill to have 2+ touchdowns. I don't know what those odds are yet. This is a rat line. Do you agree at Dolphins +4?
100%.
Yeah, this is a rat line. The
tickets are split 50-50, but the cash is 86% on Cincinnati. This is an absolute rat line. Somebody in Vegas knows something, and it's not good for anybody who is looking at this game and saying Miami should win this game outright very easily.
Yes. So I am leaning Bengals -4 right now, and I'm definitely taking Tyreek Hill to have maybe even 3. We'll see what the odds are. I'll do the math and see what I can throw at a crazy little stat. What about you? Do you have anything for this game, Mike?
I am staying away from the spread. I completely agree with you. I think it's a rat line. But I think there's also the split is even. It's not actually worse, but it's about as bad. Tickets are 55% on the over. Cash is 71% on the under. So I think that Vegas sees this game as a low scoring, Tua shoots himself in the face sort of game that we see from last year, and then the Bengals find a way to win it by a touchdown, which probably means somewhere in the neighborhood of 21-16.
Yeah,
Bengals is what Vegas is sort of projecting, or like 24-20 or somewhere in there. Um, Good.
I don't like overs on Thursday Night Football, but I will
Yeah,
say I think this over does hit. I know
that's
that's a
my. That's why I have it as a might add, but I have in the might add category Miami Cincinnati under 47.5. Something stinks with this game in the lines, and I don't know what it is. That's why I don't want to. I'm a little wary to play any of these. But if you were asking me, I would say Cincinnati -4 in the under.
All right, moving on to Great Britain. We go Vikings and Saints on a neutral site. We finally get the question answered: is Kirk Cousins good in European primetime? Which no one was asking. Um,
It's actually
Saints.
European mid afternoon, so he should still be. He should still be good, I
Ooh,
guess.
technically, is this prime time for U.S. time because no other game is being played, even though it's fucking
Mm.
8:30 in the morning. I look. I have
This
one
would
pick.
actually be primetime Hawaiian time. So
Ooh,
this is actually a U.S. primetime game for Kirk Cousins.
we got to do the math of like what foreign country does Kirk Cousins play well in their prime time? It's like Kazakhstan. I have the only thing I have for this taking the London under is fun. I do have I lean Vikings -2.5. This Saints stink. Jameis is hurt.
They just can't score.
You, yeah, and this is not. I know we talked about the actual primetime Kirk Cousins thing, and my take was proven basically correct that he only plays poorly in primetime on non Sundays. But yeah, I don't have anything else for this game. Moving on to the 1 p.m. slate. So we have Commanders at Cowboys, Bills at Ravens, Titans at Colts, Browns at Falcons, Jets at Steelers. PU, that one stinks. Jags at Eagles, Seahawks at Lions, Bears at Giants. That one also stinks. Chargers at Texans. That's your 1 p.m. slate. Um, we won't preview every game, but Mike, what are your picks for the 1 p.m. slate?
I've got two plays here that are inverse coins of last week. I have the Chargers -4.5. This line is depressed because the Chargers look so bad against the Jags.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really it because the Texans didn't do anything that would say that they're capable of keeping this within less than 6 points of the Chargers. So money is 64% on the Chargers with 58% of the tickets. So Vegas kind of agrees with that. I would let this line drop if it's going to keep dropping, but it might settle around 4.5. I still take it. Chargers are a touchdown better than the Texans. This should be a get right game for them. I get it's on the road at the Texans, but the Texans always have one of these games in the first half of the season where they play a team that's vastly superior to them at home and they get absolutely ragdolled.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I have vivid memories of Russell Wilson doing this like every year to the Texans. Either him or Patrick Mahomes just putting up 6 touchdowns and them winning like 41-3 in Houston. So
Yeah.
this is that game for Justin Herbert. Mike Williams is back, and Keenan Allen I think is probably questionable. I really like the Chargers here. I think they get right, win this game easily. And then my other play, Tennessee +3.5 at Indianapolis. Indy is riding the public momentum of beating Kansas City, and I get that they looked somewhat competent in that game, but they still only scored 17 points against the Chiefs defense that usually isn't world beaters at the beginning of the season, and they scored none against the Jaguars and tied the Texans in the preceding 2 weeks. So why Tennessee, who looked very competent against the Raiders team last week, despite the fact that they got housed by the Bills in Buffalo in their home opener, which doesn't feel like a very a thing we should really hold against them. Vrabel's a
Right.
good coach. I don't think Indy is particularly good. I think Tennessee is probably the better team. They play defense. They run the ball. Both of those travel. This is a division game. I like Tennessee plus 3.5. Possibly sprinkle Tennessee money line.
Well, it's interesting you say that. So I have a couple plays. I have 5 for the 1 p.m. slate. I do have Titans money line. I think they're just straight up the better team. I also have Ravens plus 4. So I I don't see why Ravens are a 3.5 point dog. This seems like an inverse rat line where like I'm questioning where these 4 points are coming from, but I'm taking a nibble out of the cheese anyway. Um, I have Jags plus 6.5 against the Eagles. The Eagles are a good team. They have played everybody but the Commanders close. The Jaguars seem to have found their groove, and being one of only 2 undefeated teams in the league, that eventually comes to a halt. I think it at least comes to within a 7 point halt against the Jaguars at home after a pretty dominant win over the Commanders. Giants Bears under 39. This seems somewhat explanatory. Giants have a good run defense, somewhat. The Bears cannot throw the football. The Giants don't have a good offense. 39 seems about right, especially for a 1 p.m. game. I don't think these two teams are going to score. And then I'm leaning Falcons Browns under 50. I don't see where 50 points come from these two teams. They also kind of stink. So I mean, unless you're saying the defenses are so bad that they just don't stop anybody, but they're both bad offenses. I don't inherently see why this is a 50 on the over under. 4 p.m. slate. We got Cardinals, Panthers, Patriots, Packers, Broncos, Raiders. Anything from this one, Michael?
I did miss two, at least two May ads.
Ooh, what do you
Sorry.
may ask? Yeah, yeah.
I missed two May ads on the card in the 1 p.m. slate. I have Cleveland -1 slash a pick'em if it drops to that number. I think Cleveland obviously beat up the Steelers, and they're a good football team minus the quarterback position. They go to Atlanta, so weather shouldn't be a factor. And I get that Atlanta has been impressive, but I think Cleveland is a much better roster. Um, and this feels like a game where Cleveland should show that they're the better team. At +1.5, I don't know, or sorry, -1.5 for Cleveland. But the line is dropping because most of the cash is on Atlanta. This is a spot where I tend to go against that trend, just because I don't understand why Atlanta is
Almost
the
favored.
betting.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
favorite.
betting team here. So, and maybe this is like don't fall like don't think just throw if Vegas if the heavy betters are going in the other direction, go in the other direction. But to me, it doesn't make any sense why Cleveland isn't a bigger favorite. Take Cleveland if it hits -1 or a pick 'em. And then my other one is I might add Jets Steelers over 40.5. Hear me out. um, I get that neither of these offenses are particularly good, but what I think nobody is accounting for is that without TJ Watt, neither of these defenses are particularly good either.
This
And
is
both of these teams have decent wide receivers who can make explosive plays. Um, so when you combine those together, especially if Pittsburgh ends up making a change in this game because the Jets go up, I could see easily this game ending up in a situation where over 20 points apiece ends up happening, and everybody turns around and goes, "Why was that total where it was?" In retrospect. So I kind of it's one game that nobody's gonna really put too much thought into. And I don't know which way it'll go because I think the Steelers are the better team, but I think there's a legit chance the Jets win this game outright. But I think the safer play here is the over, just because I think both teams get into the 20s here.
that's fair. I don't hate that. I don't hate that. Okay, what are your 4 p.m. slate picks?
I just have one.
Chiefs and
Arizona +2.
Bengals.
They are at the Panthers. Like we just talked about, the Panthers are bad, really bad. And Arizona, for all the crap that we've given them for their start this year, they're better. They're a better football team. So I
Yeah,
don't
I was.
understand why Carolina is a 1.5 point favorite. I get they're at home. Does that really matter that much in the NFL?
I,
I like Arizona plus 2 here. The money line's only at +104, so I'll take them with the 2 points in case something squirrely happens. But I like Arizona +2 here.
yeah, I was gonna ask, is Kyler Murray like injured and I didn't know it because there's no way they should not be a favorite. I have Carolina or I've Panther. Jesus Christ, I have the Cardinals money line. Um, I think they'll win outright. I'm not worried about 2 points. I think they win outright. I also have Packers -10. Think don't throw. This defense against whoever the hell Mac Jones had as his backup, you know, that's 10 points right there. That's a 10-point favorite. This Packers defense is very good. They'll be at home. They'll be in 4 p.m. time slot, which they typically, I feel like outperform expectations in against Bill Belichick, who, I see this as a dominant win. I think the Patriots are going to struggle without Mac Jones. I also have Raiders -2.5 against the Broncos. The Broncos stink. They were almost on my bottom five. Russell Wilson looks like shit over the past 3 weeks. Whether he improves or not, we'll see. But the Raiders need a win. I think they get it at home here in a 4 p.m. game. Final 2 games of this slate for Week 4. We have Chiefs at Buccaneers Sunday Night Football, and we have Rams at 49ers Monday Night Football. Michael, I'll defer to you first.
I don't have anything on Sunday night. I sniffed around the under, which the cash trends go in favor of the 93% of the money on the under. I think that there's a trend among even more than I would say not like high stakes gamblers, but more than casual observers. That the primetime games are consistently going under. So I think
Under.
that's probably where the money is going. But if I were picking, and I'm picking not betting because it's illegal in North Carolina, um, if I were picking, that would be my pick too. But I'm staying away from that. The line I like more, San Francisco, or sorry, the Rams +2.5 at the 49ers. This
Rat
is not
line.
a get right spot for the 49ers coming off a bad loss in Denver where they didn't look competent at all on offense. I get Shanahan has McVay's number. I get all that. But this team is not a this 49ers edition of this team right now is not one that's built to succeed. Now maybe they do, maybe they figure it out here like they've always owned McVay. I just think +2.5 for the Rams, who seem to have figured some things out from their opening week loss to the Bills. I think they're the better team. They go in there and win that game.
Yeah, so I have a play for Sunday night, and I have Rams money line +115. I don't know why the Rams are not favored here. I again, I understand also the history between the two, but this has got to be a Rams victory, especially how the 49ers looked on their last primetime game. I mean, that was ugly. Jimmy G might really be in trouble if he expects to keep being a backup in the NFL. So I have Rams +115. I think they're a much better team. I think in primetime they typically show out, and I think they need to keep up pace with what they're doing. Interestingly enough, the Rams do have a large percent of the tickets, but like only 30% of the money are on the Rams.
Yeah.
So this is the definition of a rat line, one that sticks out to the public, but someone knows something. But
Yeah, I think I might take it. I might put it in the May ads, and I'll see how the rest of Sunday goes. Just because of that, I
yeah,
looked at those numbers too, and I see them as well. And now I'm like something. This is the Bengals Dolphins conundrum just for like 5 days later. This is the exact same spot. You're just looking at it like I don't understand why the Rams are 2.5 point dogs here, and then you think, wait a second, somebody understands why, and I'm scared to be on the other end of that.
And I don't. Well, look, I'm gonna be a rat. I'm gonna take the cheese. I'm gonna bet Rams money line, and then my Sunday night football play is Chiefs minus 1.5. Um, the Buccaneers just don't have a wide receiving core that's reliable. Tom Brady has looking not great in the past couple games. You saw the line shift for that exact reason. Chiefs are going to come off a loss. They're going to be fired up. They're going to be away playing a good Bucks defense, but I think Patrick Mahomes can come out um, and make up a point and a half. I may lean even to Chiefs just money line straight up. I know that'll be in the negative money. Um, but this seems like a game the Chiefs win. So Chiefs money line's minus 130. This just seems like a game that the Chiefs win. The over under is 45.5. That's dropped 5 points since it opened. I don't like that at all. So I'm gonna go with Chiefs money line and or spread. I'll determine when I put my pick in at the end. But I don't think the Bucks come out with a win this game. All right. Well, that has been our week 4 NFL preview. Mike, you got anything to add? Yeah, go watch some football. Like and subscribe. Tune in for our college football show, which is live for the upcoming week 5 for college football. Come out with a video every week, one for NFL, one for college football. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good day.